Much excitement and some anticipation over Donald Trump's new term as president, and he takes over on January the 20th. Among other issues, it is widely believed with good reason that ties between the US and India will get better under Trump given his rapport with the Prime Minister Modi. But Richard Rosso from the Center for Strategic and International Studies tells us that a great deal of what is going on or may go on will not really depend on the president or this president or that. There are fundamental issues at stake here.
On defense and security across different administrations and different political parties in the United States, we've had continued progress in recent years, and I suspect that that'll continue. On economic and commercial cooperation, that's been a little bit more up and down. Generally, you've seen a Biden administration that's been pretty supportive of trying to expand outbound investment into India and strategic sectors, but that isn't always the case. We can't necessarily take that for granted, after the election.
When it comes to the specifics of investment, and investment is about specifics, there are some hurdles that stand in the way that have been hard to shift for some time now. Some of these could well arise from India's Make in India needs.
Yeah, it is hard. What India expects and almost kind of demands from the United States is to share levels of technology, not even at commercial rates. I mean, India could buy most any kind of technology they want from the United States. The question is, would we actually share and help India learn to teach and make it? The challenge is that most of that technology is controlled by the U.S. private sector. How does the U.S. government possibly put on the table negotiating preferential agreements to get intellectual property in Indian hands for its own use when that comes from a private company? We wouldn't want the Indian government to negotiate on Tata behalf to give up TCS's secrets, for instance, but yet that's kind of like what India's held out as part of what it wants to see. And I'll tell you, like the U.S. Department of Defense is trying a lot of different things to make that happen. That's how important the relationship is. So I know India wants to see it go faster and better, but when you consider the difficulties from the U.S. government getting that IP from private companies and sharing that for less than market rates, let's say, it's not an easy task. I think sometimes we kind of assume that there's some magical button, depending on controls, where they can make this kind of happen, but it's not.
India's deal with General Electric to produce its F414 fighter jet engines does include substantial technology transfer, but the contract has been delayed. A number of other US contractors such as Apple, Boeing, Lockheed Martin are already manufacturing in India, and India is looking now for new manufacturing also to build its maritime capabilities. And then Rick sees other untapped possibilities.
But there's emerging domains right now, which India doesn't talk about quite as much. But when you talk about unmanned maritime systems, unmanned aviation, those are some of the areas where we expect, and we've seen it play out in the Ukraine conflict, where you can get an asymmetrical advantage for a low price by leveraging and using some of these emerging technologies.
The big, broad Indian dream is of substantial shift in manufacturing from China to India. Rick sees that to some extent.
Yeah, fractionally. We got a couple of announcers of telecom suppliers of making big investments in India, and it does feel like maybe India's kind of hit that moment. But if you look at the government of India's own numbers on foreign direct investment, the Reserve Bank of India puts out a monthly compilation, and it's been relatively flat. You had a bit of a spike on foreign investment coming in actually in the middle of COVID, and it's mostly been in the decline since then. A bit of a spark in the last month, which shows that maybe there's a resurgence, but we're talking 50, $60 billion annually of FDI, which is well below, 100 plus billion that China is still pulling in, even to this extent, with all the pressures against investing in China.